The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hello, and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm Kristen Stoes, and I was curious about the history of parliamentary procedure and why this process, along with Robert's Rules of Order, has been followed for over 140 years. Please stay with us to hear the important points of order from professional registered parliamentarian Karen Watson.
Hi, I'm Lita Powell Drake, and today we're going to talk about the Cornhusker State Games. They've been going on for many, many years, and you're never too old to participate in the Cornhusker State Games. We're going to concentrate on that. So please, stay tuned.
I'm Doug Joes. Today I will visit with Peggy Reicher and Dale Johannes about preventing brain injuries and what you can do to help yourself recover. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm Jerry Renaud. Today we have a very serious subject that we want to talk about. That is depression, and it's something that can affect people of all ages. We have a fabulous guest, Dr. Dave Myers from the Bryan Mental Health Services, to talk about some of the symptoms and the ways that we can talk about this and help alleviate this problem. You don't want to miss it. Stick around.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Any civic or business meeting uses parliamentary procedure, but have any of us given much thought as to why? I'm Kristen Stoes, and I'm pleased to welcome professional registered parliamentarian Karen Watson, who will give us the backstory on Robert's Rules of Order. Karen, welcome to Live and Learn.
Thank you, Kristen.
So nice to have you here today. Honestly, this is a fairly unusual subject to become so involved in, at least to the extent that you have. I'm curious to know how you originally became focused on parliamentary procedure.
Most parliamentarians become parliamentarians because of an experience with a bad meeting.
Oh, is that what happened? And so then you got into the subject matter, and what appealed to you about it that made you think, gosh, I'd really like to learn more?
When you learn Roberts, you learn how meetings can be conducted fairly and with efficiency. There's no guessing. When you know the rules, it's to provide fairness for the members in the organizations, and that fascinated me.
Well, you really took it to heart, and you went through a lot of training. Tell us about the training that it took to become a professional registered parliamentarian.
All right, there are two National Associations of Parliamentarians. I chose to be credentialed with the National Association of Parliamentarians. First, you have to pass a membership test, which is basically you have to know basic information about Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay.
From there, if you want to become registered, you must do an extensive exam. It contains 5 parts. It will take you anywhere from 3 to 6 months of self-study. Each part of the exam must be graded at least 80%.
Okay.
The 5 different parts, it takes about 5 hours, 6 hours to do the exam. You're proctored.
Okay.
Then to become a professionally registered parliamentarian, that is where you can apply the book knowledge to actually leading a meeting, and there you go before a credentialing board. It takes about 3 days at a convention. You not only show them that you have the intellectual knowledge, but that you can practically provide the service as well.
How long did this process take you, Karen?
For me, it took about 2 years.
Okay, all right. I believe it, that the book is a large book to have to commit to memory practically. Do you need to be recertified in this then every so often?
Yes, every 6 years you have continuing education units, and that brings you up on the most current to date practices in the field as well.
Yes, okay, understand. Let's then get into this book, Robert's Rules of Order. When was it written and why?
Originally 1876.
Okay.
It was written by a Dr. General Henry M. Martin.
Okay.
Would you like a little history?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I'd like to hear about him.
His grandfather was a minister. His father was an educator. Robert was a general in the Army.
Okay.
So he had a church background with meetings, and then being in the Army, he was transferred many times across the United States. Then he would also lead collegiate lectures.
Oh.
As he traveled across the United States, he noticed that all of the different organizations had their own rules of order. He was the first one to codify these rules for organizations outside of government, non-government organizations. When he codified it, that allowed people from one part of the country to travel to another part of the country and to be able to know the same rules in a meeting.
Would make it very cohesive.
Yes.
Yes, yes, that would make sense. So what is actually the basic purpose of Robert's Rules of Order? What does it do for a meeting?
It provides fairness for the participants in the meeting, and that's what you really want. A bad meeting is when both sides are yelling at each other. I mean,
That's a bad meeting.
Roberts is rules to make fairness, and then when they're applied, they make the meetings efficient. Both sides can be heard. Decisions can be made with input from both sides.
Sometimes I think when we sit in a meeting and we use Robert's Rules of Order, it bogs down a meeting. But you say, in fact, it's just the opposite.
Yes, we were talking about that earlier. Most people think that Roberts are rules that hinder an organization. You can't do this, you can't do that. You can only talk for 2 minutes, you can only do this. Now, an organization usually has bylaws. That is what the members agree to for the purpose of their organization. A parliamentarian makes sure that debate is handled according to their bylaws, that they're doing business according to their own bylaws, and then Roberts comes in and tells you how to procedurally do that correctly. You agree ahead of time. Shall we all be allowed to speak for 2 minutes, for 10 minutes? Should we, and so forth. Therefore, the meeting actually becomes quite fair.
And I like that part of it. It puts everyone on an even footing.
Yes.
So then everyone can freely express their opinions.
Yes.
And feel like they can do that.
Yes.
Yes. So we had an interesting discussion right before we started to tape between Nebraska Nice and parliamentary procedure. How do those go together in Nebraska?
All right. First, let me give you the background. Roberts says that his method will be able to take two impassioned different sides and bring them together to have a decision through Roberts having the debate.
Okay.
Now, when you have people that are nice, like Nebraskans, we tend to be nice.
We do.
All right. When you have people that are just nice at a meeting, they tend to listen to what's going on at the meeting, but if they disagree, they kind of do it like kind of away from the meeting or in the background of the meeting.
Okay.
So that even though they're nice and they're agreeing during the meeting, then it becomes so that it's ironic because Roberts is supposed to provide the fairness for a meeting to get it done efficiently. When you have what is called a pseudo consensus, this people are just being nice.
Right.
That's when you have the conflict outside of the meeting or beyond the meeting where the pseudo consensus. So Nebraskans, I tend to notice that Nebraskans tend to want to be this Nebraska nice in the meeting, but it leads to this pseudo consensus where if we would use Roberts
Stick
and
to the
apply
rules.
it, then we would have the fairness.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. You told me that using this procedure can even help in our everyday lives.
Yes.
How can that help us?
All right, Roberts is for groups of 2 or more.
Okay.
What basic relationship in life could have 2 or more? You can have a husband and wife. You can have a mom and a child. You can have a parent and their child. So I joke that Roberts can be applied, for example, the husband says, I'm going to go out to the motorcycle show this weekend and I'll just leave the wash for later. And the wife can go, point of order, it's your weekend to do the wash.
So it'll take the emotion out of that situation,
Yes,
right? Isn't that what it's based on?
Yes,
Okay.
so it's quite interesting.
I wish I would have known this 35 years ago with my children. That would have helped. So Karen, what do you feel is the least understood rule of order?
Just in
In running a meeting, what is the least understood rule of order?
Most people believe that all motions have to be seconded.
Oh, well, yes, I think most people do think that, and that's not right.
It's theoretically right, but in practice, when an organization elects a presiding officer or a president,
Okay.
they are the ones that are supposed to preside over the meeting. And where do you have the presiding officer sit? You have them sit in front of people, in front of the whole group.
Right.
You have them stand at a lectern so everyone can see them.
Okay.
But the opposite is true. The presiding officer can then see everyone in the assembly. So if someone would make a motion, let's support the Nebraska football team, and if the president sees people nodding their head yes, the presiding officer can go ahead and process that motion without a second, because he can tell that most people in the assembly would agree with that motion. Now,
Interesting.
he can start processing the motion. Someone who would disagree with that then during debate could counter debate and have debate
Sure.
opposed. But to have the motion offered and the president start to process the motion and then have someone say, point of order, there was no second, that's really not necessary.
I
Motions theoretically need a second, but the presiding officer is the one who can process the motion
All
without
right.
a second.
And really, when someone makes a second to a motion, they just mean let's debate this, right? They
Yes.
they don't necessarily even have to be in favor of it. They
That
just
is
want to hear
correct.
the debate, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. I know, being a professional, you help struggling organizations, but besides in running meetings, there are other ways that you can help organizations, such as even in minute taking or bylaw writing. What are some of the most common mistakes an organization makes when taking their minutes?
They want to put everything in the minutes.
Okay.
Everything. So and so said this, so and so said that. We took a 5-minute recess break. In the minutes show what an organization has agreed upon to do, the actions of the organization. Typically, I can take 6 pages worth of minutes and I go through and I find what did this organization decide to do through an adopted motion. And I can condense minutes down to a page.
Yeah, so make them succinct.
Succinct.
Yeah.
And then typically you can look at an organization's minutes and really find out how much they do.
I see.
By looking at their minutes to see
Sure.
how many motions do they adopt, what kind of motions have they adopted, or is their minutes just fluff and they just reinvent the wheel, or just...
And how important are bylaws to an organization?
Bylaws are your objectives.
And yet no one ever wants to serve on a bylaw committee, but they're so important, right?
Absolutely. Bylaws are what your organization's are the objectives of your organization. So when you first get together, you make your bylaws, that's what you are coming together, you all agree, this is what we believe is important, and this is what our organization, the potential we could have if all of us agree to these bylaws. We're more mighty as an organization than one individual.
It's really the skeleton of the organization.
Yes. And may I
build
add
from there.
something?
You may.
That's why revisions of bylaws need to be done about every 3 years, because look how fast our society changes.
Okay.
So you need to have your bylaws reviewed, and this is where a parliamentarian can help you. You said most people don't like to do revisions. If an organization would come to me and say, we want our bylaws reviewed, I have them tell me, okay, what are your, I'd have them tell me just in a conversation,
I
what's
see.
your organization's objectives?
Okay.
How are you headed? What have you been doing lately? And I get it from them, what is the current feel of their organization? Then I'll go back and read their bylaws. Then I can make suggestions for revising them to bring them up to date, so they will reflect their current objectives.
Yes, that all makes a lot of sense, Karen. Well, I know Robert's Rules of Order itself, I mean, it's been enforced since 1876, so it's gone through a number of revisions. How does it keep up with technology and all the changes in society? And just a couple quick points on that.
All right. Robert wrote the original book, and then his second wife helped him to revise it.
Okay.
And after Robert passed, his daughter-in-law took it up, Sarah Corbin Roberts, and then a foundation was established, was passed down. Henry Robert III was the head of the foundation, and now he has passed. About every 10 years, the book is revised.
I see. So they
since
have to
about
keep up.
1980.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing.
And then it can have the most current,
Yes.
like we said, meetings
Sure.
are now
Sure.
done by the internet, so the most current revision.
Well, Karen, we're going to be putting up some websites on screen in
Wonderful.
case someone is interested in this subject, and talk just a brief second about your local meetings, your chapter here.
All right, we have a Lincoln area chapter.
Okay.
We have people come in all the way from Eagle and people all the way from Norfolk. We have a Lincoln area. It's called the Star City Area Unit of Parliamentarians.
Okay, all right.
We meet on the fourth Monday night every month.
And the public is welcome,
The
right?
public is
I
welcome.
think that's wonderful to get out there.
It's
I think it would be
free.
and it's free. I think it would be a fascinating meeting. I'm sorry that our segment is coming to an end, but I certainly thank you for being here today and helping us all be more efficient, effective communicators.
My pleasure.
Karen Watson, thank you so much. And as I bring the gavel down on this segment, please remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
Vulnerable and senior adults might be living in silent fear of elder abuse and financial exploitation. We can do something about it. The Nebraska DHHS recommends that communities maintain and improve resources such as public transportation and senior centers to prevent social isolation. Engage professionals in various disciplines to find solutions to end elder abuse. Every year, June 15 is observed as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, an opportunity to ensure justice for all.
Welcome to Live and Learn. I'm Lita Powell Drake, and today we're going to do something very special. You know about the Cornhusker State Games. Well, they've been going on for a long time, and wondering if you're a participant. Now, usually you think of the Cornhusker State Games for a bunch of kids, but it's really for everybody. You'd be surprised at the number of seniors who are involved, and we're going to concentrate on the seniors today. Dave Malarick is with us today. He is the Executive Director of the Nebraska Sports Council. You've been with the program for how long, Dave?
Well, this will be my 29th Cornhusker State Games.
You missed the first one?
I missed the first 5 or 6.
Oh my goodness. Okay, now how long have the Cornhusker State Games been going on?
The Cornhusker State Games started in 1985.
My goodness.
So we had a group of sports-minded people that caught wind of this state games movement. It really started in the Northeast for the United States and spread down the eastern seaboard into the Midwest. And when it got to the Midwest, they started doing these state games kind of across this region. And that's when it got going. 1985 was the first year.
Well, and how have the games changed over the course of time?
Well, there are a lot of changes sport by sport.
Oh, yeah.
When you look through there, but really it's amazing how much the program has stayed as it was started, and that's a testament to the fact that people here are competitive minded. They love to participate, they love sports, and that we have such a strong volunteer and sponsor base here in Nebraska. So, you'll see things like what they wear is a little bit different. Some years people are wearing beards,
Yeah,
and some years
I
they're not.
noticed
So
on you.
there's a lot that looks different. And
He says he keeps his face warm.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Ice fishermen do this.
Are you an ice fisher
I
person?
am. Yes, I love it.
Did you catch anything?
We had a really good winter. Of course, it was a long season for us. We had a lot of ice for quite a while this year.
It was so bitterly cold.
Sometimes it was, but they make really good clothing.
What you can't put ice fishing in the Cornhusker State Games.
It would never work in July.
During the summer.
When we do a winter games, maybe we'll do that.
Okay, 35 years it's been going along. Now, when and where are the opening ceremonies? That's always really special.
Opening ceremonies take place on Friday, July 19th, and they start at 8 p.m. at Seacrest Field, which is on the campus of Lincoln East, about 70th and A Street. The opening ceremonies always begin with what we call Sport Fest, and that's where we treat the athletes to a meal and there's entertainment. But when we get to the ceremonies, it's not unlike the Olympic opening ceremonies.
Oh, boy.
There's a lot of pomp and pageantry and patriotic flair, and it really just serves to get the athletes in the spirit of competition.
Well, what about the registration for the athletes? And is there food there? When people come there, do they eat the food? And you pay for it, or is it free, or what?
Great questions. The opening ceremonies is free to all registered participants. So when they sign up for the state games, they're entitled to what we call the Athlete Pass. And the Athlete Pass gets them into Sport Fest. They get to engage in the entertainment. They get to go by vendor exhibits, there's a lot of freebies there too. They get to do the athlete meal, which we serve, and that's all free to them. If somebody comes along with them, they can get into Sport Fest and partake in the athlete meal for $5. Anybody really in the public can come, and they can do the athlete meal at Sport Fest for $5. When we move everybody over to the stadium, because all of Sport Fest is in Lincoln East High School, we'll do athlete staging for the parade of athletes. We do a parade just like the Olympics. We don't march in country by country, but we come in sport by sport.
Yeah, that's
so
a
you
good
line up
idea.
with the athletes of your sport in between the two facilities, and then those who aren't marching in the parade go sit in the stands at Seacrest Stadium. To do that, it's $10 for a non-paid participant. But all of the participants, that pass gets them in for free. And of course, the show is packed with entertainment, so there's a lot of value in that.
And you always have some special featured performers. Who is going to do it this year?
Well, this year we're featuring a group called Flippin' Out, and they use 2 trampolines. And yeah, you can see
that's making me very
what's happening there, and they're very dynamic. We've seen some of their stuff on YouTube, and we've heard from other similar stadium shows around the country that there's a lot of humor mixed in, but what they do is not everyone can do, and you can't see it every day. So we're excited to have them as the featured entertainment.
They'd
live.
have to come early to set all that equipment up.
They will.
They? 'Cause-
Yeah, they'll be here in the afternoon. I assume they'll rehearse a couple of times. That's usually what happens.
All right. Well, now we're going to take a look at some of the sports that you can participate in, because these are for the seniors. And we're going to start with our dear old friend, Rosenbaum. And because he was the one who started, he's very involved right now, but he started the horseshoe pitching. How's he doing?
He's doing okay. He's had some health issues over the past about 5 years, but he's still getting around good and communicates. And of course, his passion is horseshoe pitching, and that sport is really fun.
He's special to my heart because he's the one who taught me to play horseshoes. So I participate in the horseshoe pitching every single year, and he's very, very special. But the thing I liked about that picture that you just saw is the guy. You see what he's got in his mouth? Have you looked at it closely?
No, I haven't.
A cigar. I love those old guys out there with their cigars out there. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the women playing badminton. So we've got some, and where is that held?
Badminton is actually one of our sports that takes place in Omaha, and it's at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And our athlete of the year, our senior athlete of the year last year, came from that sport. So it's very popular with athletes of all ages, really, but you see a good representation from those 50 and over in badminton.
And here's one, if you don't want to go out and sweat a lot, here's something that a lot of people do, is just walk the mall.
Yep, the mall walk is a very popular sport for good reason. In July, it's generally going to top out in at least the 90s, if not the 100s.
Oh, boy.
And the mall walk gives everyone a chance to participate. It's non-competitive, and they basically have a number of laps that you take at Gateway. And every time you come around, you get a notch in your card, and you walk until you've finished the allotted miles. You can go up to 10 kilometers, which is 6.2 miles, or you can do the 2 mile or the 1 mile if you're not quite able to get up to 6 miles.
So the men and the women can do that, and what about kids, if you want to bring some kids
Absolutely.
along? Anybody can
Yep.
walk it.
It's really a good family event. Of course, you see a lot of seniors there, but we see a lot of families too that want to be part of the games, and maybe the young ones aren't quite ready to do something outside or something more organized.
And then, of course, shooting pool is another one of my favorites. Any women out there shoot pool?
Absolutely.
Oh, good.
Madsen's Billiards hosts our pocket billiards every year, and it's a great venue because they have so many tables. And there are divisions for seniors. There's an overall competitive division. It's really well I guess, divided so that everyone has a chance to win a medal.
I used to play 8-ball. Do they still do that? I don't even
They
know.
do.
I don't even know.
They do still play 8-ball.
Oh.
That is the featured game. So
Oh, good.
yeah.
Do that. All right, and then one of the sports that has really become very significant around here is pickleball. Will you tell us about that? Explain what this is.
Well, pickleball is, I would say, kind of a cross between tennis and table tennis when you look at the rules of it. But it's played on a modified tennis court. So they'll use the inner 4 squares of a tennis court. And it's most popular in a doubles format, but we do have singles divisions as well. And instead of a racket with strings in it, it's a wooden or acrylic paddle, a little bit bigger than a table tennis paddle. The ball is not unlike a wiffle ball, but it's a little bit heavier, so it travels faster.
It's got all those holes in it, so
exactly.
it doesn't go very far.
Yep, and you can hear the click-clack when you go to watch pickleball. And it's an interesting sport. Most of the rules are tennis-related, so you're letting it bounce one time on each side and then returning it to the other player. It's very fast-moving. Don't be fooled. But the lateral movement is very minimal compared to tennis, which is what makes it popular with a lot of seniors, especially ex-tennis players whose bodies have maybe worn out. So the spirit is willing, and some of the flesh is, but the joints have taken a beating over the years, and so there's less movement, number of steps-wise, in between when they have to get to the ball and return it to the other side.
So you're really standing pretty close to the net when you're so you don't
Much
have to
more
work so hard.
Yep, and it's a lot more about eye-hand coordination, which these players still have to a large extent.
And another factor is the wind. Because I remember going out and trying to learn to play it, and the wind was blowing, and the ball is, filled with all these little holes, and so I'd go like this and miss it because the ball was going over there.
Thankfully, our competition, and what you see a lot now since the sport has gotten very popular, is indoors.
Yes.
So we play this tournament at Woods, and they have a beautiful, the beautiful complex that's opened in just in the last 3 or 4 years. Is host to this event, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's the actual shooting of guns.
Absolutely. We have, I think now 10 shooting sports, and what you see there is our pistol competition. This happens out at the Weeping Water Gun Club range. We have several events at the Isaac Walton League here in Lincoln, and several events at Lincoln Trap and Skeet. So there's a mixture of different types of rifles. We have BB gun air rifles. We have shotgun events like trap shooting and skeet shooting, and then of course the pistol. So there's a really wide range of shooting sports.
And Dorothy Ekblad lives on.
She does.
I hope you know about Dorothy.
Dorothy was maybe our most prolific athlete among females, let alone senior athletes. For many years, she participated in multiple Cornhusker State Games sports, and because of her personality, she became well known to the staff and all of the volunteers. She passed away last year, and to honor her memory, we've named our Senior Athlete of the Year award after Dorothy Ekblad.
Oh, how special.
Senior females have an opportunity to earn the Dorothy Ekblad Award, and it's a perfect complement, dovetail with our Senior Male Athlete of the Year, which was named after Lee Todd, very much similar in personality and multi-event participation to Dorothy over the years. But there's a chance for all seniors to earn some recognition for their participation, and it's named after Dorothy, who has this legacy now.
She was a special woman, very, very special woman. How many different sports actually are there?
There are 71 sports now. We have 3 new ones this year, including kart racing, miniature golf, and a sport called cornhole.
Cornhole?
Yes. It's basically
for the
also known as
games, right?
It's also known as bag toss, and it's gotten really popular it's been popular for many years as a tailgate event, but there's been a more serious element come up, and there's a sanctioning body now, so we're going to give cornhole a try.
Okay. Is there a deadline to sign up?
The final deadline for most sports is the 8th of July. There are price increases that come about every 6 weeks, and the basic thing to remember is that the sooner you sign up, the less it costs you to get into your event.
Are most of the athletes from Lincoln, or do they come from all over the state?
Good question. in general, every year more than 85 counties are represented from
my
across
goodness.
Nebraska. Now, about any given year, about 45% of the participants are from Lincoln and Lancaster County. So we have a great representation here in Lincoln, but the athletes come from all across Nebraska.
And I'm so proud to have one of, I've participated almost in every Cornhusker State Games. And so I wore this because it went black with the black, and that would be more appropriate. But I was going to wear them all, but I feel like this. But they're special. They're really special.
It's always been fun to see you out at the events, Lita, and you've been a champion and an advocate of the program. And I must say, you still look fantastic.
Well, I'm not dead. I'm not dead yet.
That medal was from the 20th anniversary games.
Oh, what
I noticed that.
I didn't even look at the date on it.
That was a fun year.
Anyway, our thanks to Dave Malarick for being with us today. And remember, it's never too late to live and learn, and you too can participate in the Cornhusker State Games.
Hi, I'm Randy Jones with Aging Partners. Did you know that Lincoln expects a 75% increase in the number of seniors living in our community over the next 15 years? Aging Partners is a community service that provides fitness programs to help keep older adults strong and healthy. This year, Lincoln Cares donations are providing funds for new fitness equipment. You can help make this happen. Sign up to support Lincoln Cares and add $1 to your LES bill each month.
Welcome to Live and Learn. The Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska provides support and advocacy for people who have brain injuries. I'm Doug Joes, and joining me today are Peggy Reicher and Dale Johannes. And Peggy, let's start a little bit about the background of the agency you're involved with.
Sure. The Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska is a 501c3, so we're a nonprofit advocating for people with brain injury, kind of the voice of brain injury in Nebraska. We started back in about 2009, 2010 to kind of help expand services, increase awareness, provide advocacy, prevention, and education for people with brain injury.
You talk about two definitions of brain injury, the traumatic brain injury and the acquired brain injury. Tell us, give us a little background there and the definitions.
Sure. Acquired brain injury is kind of the overall umbrella of brain injury. All brain injury falls under acquired. Traumatic falls under acquired. Acquired can be a stroke, somebody who's had cancer, who's had meningitis. It can be a tumor removal. It can be an anoxic injury. That's a type of acquired brain injury. Traumatic is an injury that has what we hear about a lot more, where there's a bump, a blow, a jolt to the head. We think of that happening when car accidents, assaults, falls, things like that.
These days we hear a lot about brain injuries related to concussions with athletic events, but there are lots of other, as you indicated, lots of other causes of brain injury. And what are the main causes of injuries that people that you work with?
Well, the primary injury right now, brain injury cause is falls. People, especially as we all age, we get older, we are have a greater tendency to fall. The other is being struck or hit by, and it's where you haven't, like an assault. Motor vehicles is also a high reason for getting a brain injury. So those are a sports injury, a concussion, oftentimes is referred to as just a concussion, but a concussion is a brain injury also.
Yeah, right. I think that gets sort of fuzzed over sometimes. There really is a brain issue there.
It is a brain injury.
The signs, though, sometimes they're immediate and sometimes not so immediate. What are the signs of brain injuries?
Well, typically what we hear people talk about, we kind of put it into three different domains. We see physical, cognitive, and emotional. Some physical signs after a person has had a hit on the head or fallen or whatnot is we'll see moments of they have complaints of headaches, dizziness, nauseousness, maybe some vision problems, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound. And so those are some main physical components. When we think of the cognitive components, it falls under people are having problems with memory, attention, concentration, having problems with what we call executive functioning, being able to process information in a way that you would expect somebody to be able to do. The third is kind of emotional. We sometimes see irritability, anxiety, mood swings, impulsivity, just acting different. And people want to attribute that to just moodiness, but if they've hit their head, it can be also because of a brain injury.
But these might be immediate, but they might be delayed.
They might be immediate, but they might be delayed. I know in working with some of the students, for example, or even working in the aging population, saying you might not see these signs or symptoms show up for up to 48 hours after a fall or after a hit. So being able to correlate the two, going back to a little bit of the history, like what had happened, and does this reside within that 48 hours?
Dale, you're a volunteer helping people in these situations. Tell us a little bit about your experience with a brain injury.
Mine happened 30 years ago, just over 30 years ago. I was 17. I was in a car accident. I was a passenger in a car that ran a stop sign through a 55-mile-an-hour street. The car that struck us hit us directly on the passenger door, my door, going 46 miles an hour. They calculated that in the accident report. I broke 17 ribs, I punctured both my lungs, I shattered my jaw, I cracked my pelvis, and some other stuff. But the worst thing that happened to me was the fact that I had a brain injury. Because of the brain injury, I was unable to speak for 6 weeks. And when I could speak again, I had the maturity level of a second grader. I've just been incredibly fortunate to be able to come all the way back. Oftentimes this doesn't happen. And because of that, I needed at that time, well, and still do, I need to work with people with brain injury to repay. I feel an obligation to repay things, to repay what I went through. I worked at a place in Omaha called Quality Living for about 9 years after I graduated from college. And then when I moved down here to Lincoln, I became part of the Brain Injury Advisory Council. And on that council in 2008, I became the lead of a subsection of the group looking at the elderly population and brain injury. One thing that, over time, I've realized is that I was very fortunate in that while my injuries were substantial, they were able to identify the fact that I had a brain injury right away.
So what were the keys then to this recovery process?
Honestly, 30 years later, still looking. But persistence was one of them. And again, as I mentioned, the ability the fact that I knew what I was dealing with right away. I mean, because there's obvious issues that I had, I was dealing with some stuff. And I was able to begin therapy right away. Whereas individuals in the elderly population oftentimes aren't as fortunate. Individuals in the elderly population also often have what are called comorbidities or other diagnoses actually that you can see. And the vast majority of the time, those other diagnoses that you can see are going to be what gets the attention. And the brain injury is an afterthought. But in reality, brain injury in this population is a huge, huge issue. It presents very similar to dementia, whereas dementia, a dementia diagnosis will come after months and years, after an extended period of seeing a doctor, and it's a slow decline. With a brain injury, it's going to be almost immediate. As Peggy said, it could take up to 48 hours, but in comparing that to dementia, 48 hours is nothing.
Dale, you've come a long way, as you describe here. So a person with a brain injury then can lead what we might call a normal life. I mean, maybe that's not a correct term here, but
it's occasionally individuals are able to lead a normal life. Oftentimes it's going to be a new normal. And it just takes time. And oftentimes that time is something that individuals in the elderly population aren't fortunate enough to have. So prevention is going to be a huge issue in this population.
Another issue with aging is that our brains shrink as we age.
Yeah, and
how does that sort of factor in here?
and actually, it took me a long time to realize. I couldn't understand how what I went through could be the same thing of just a fall. I mean, a car accident and a fall could cause the same issues. I couldn't understand that. But beginning in young adulthood, a cognitively healthy brain can shrink 1.9% every 10 years, as is shown in the display in the picture there. That just over time that adds up, and there's more space in your skull for your brain to move. The rate of brain shrinkage increases with age, and it becomes more prominent around the age of 60. And as the brain size decreases, the skull size stays the same, which increases the likelihood of your brain bouncing around the inside of your skull. Because of this, falls with the head strike become more life-threatening as we age.
So then, what are then seniors? What should they be particularly aware of or sensitive to in terms of trying to not experience brain injuries?
One very important thing. There are three things here that I would suggest that are on display there. They should screen their living area for tripping hazards, such as rugs, cords, or oxygen tubing, if that's something that there will be in their environment. Pets are another tripping hazard. Toys, or if kids are in the environment, and how furniture is placed. The assessment part, you need to assess risk factors. Does the person need a walker? Their mental status, their gait pattern, and there may be tendencies. By tendencies, I mean by getting up quickly from chairs, they're moving quickly in their environment. And finally, on the list, intervention. That's going to be, is an assistive device needed, like a walker or a cane or something? Having proper footwear. Is the lighting of the area good? Have the person's eyes been checked recently? And finally, for the cognitively aware individuals, they need to be able to do a self-assessment before they get up in the morning to check and see how they're feeling.
Very good. Peggy, just sort of summarize this for us, what people can do to help prevent these accidents and for recovery. What do you see as the keys, people that you've worked with?
I think certainly Dale hit along many of them, really looking at fall prevention. What can we do to just look at our environment, get our eyes checked, have the doctors that you're working with have a good understanding of what your environment looks like, and also taking a look at medications. And sometimes medications can cause some dizziness and whatnot, so just being aware.
If people want more information or they have some questions about what we've discussed, you're open to discuss this with people, and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, certainly. We encourage folks to give us a call. We're also online on the Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska, www.biane.org. And also on that website also is our phone number that they can reach us at.
We've sort of focused on aging here, but you work with all ages?
We do. We are a statewide organization working with all ages.
And do you have outreach throughout the state, or how do you make contact with people across the state?
Right now, if somebody's been identified or diagnosed with a brain injury, they get our information through a brain injury registry letter. But certainly, brain injury can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And so the ways in which we promote ourselves is opportunities like this, but also encouraging people to look at our website.
Thanks for sharing this. This is a lot of good information, and we hope people will take advantage if they're in that situation. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember, it's never too late to live and learn how to prevent brain injuries.
Vulnerable and senior adults might be living in silent fear of elder abuse and financial exploitation. We can do something about it. The Nebraska DHHS recommends that communities maintain and improve resources such as public transportation and senior centers to prevent social isolation. Engage professionals in various disciplines to find solutions to end elder abuse. Every year, June 15 is observed as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, an opportunity to ensure justice for all.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. What you just saw was a nice little video and a public service announcement created in part by the Nebraska Department of Health to talk about issues of depression and the way that you can talk about it and try to help other people. And that's what we want to do today. It's a very serious problem, one that we need to be concerned about. It hits people of all ages, and we have a fabulous guest here today to talk about it. It is Dr. David Myers from the Bryan Mental Health Services. Did I get that right?
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for being here. This is a tough topic. You do fabulous work. How did you get involved in this? I always think it's fun for our audience to know a little bit about the guests. How did you decide that this was where you were going to make a career out of?
Well, I grew up with my, I always think back to my parents, and they were very, very involved in the community where I grew up, and gave back to our community in Seward. I grew up in Seward, and my dad was involved in the local fire department, and and still is involved as a retired member. And growing up and listening to the scanner all the time, and kind of growing up around the firehouse, and just seeing how everybody giving back and seeing people in need, and I knew that I wanted to do something along those lines. And then when I got into college, I went in to play football and to go pre-med. And
it's an interesting combination.
Yeah. And but when I went to college, and I took a psychology class, and at Nebraska Wesleyan, and I had a professor who took me under his wing, and I really loved the class, and he encouraged me to take some internships, practicum experiences, some hands-on experiences, and I really grew in love with psychology and with mental health, and I knew that I needed to change my major, and that's the direction I wanted to go. And I got involved in some local efforts with the Lincoln chapter of the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and worked with some peers here in Lincoln, and knew that helping others is what I wanted to do, and that's the direction I ended up going.
Well, you do fabulous work, and thank you very much for all of us
Thank you.
in those endeavors. Let's talk a little bit about depression. I mean, it's a word we hear a lot. It's a word we sort of use. I was depressed yesterday, or my dog looks depressed, or that's depressing kind of news. We're really talking about something different here, aren't we?
Yeah, depression is an illness like any other illness. It's a brain disorder. It's a disorder of the brain, in that we all have the blues from now and then. It's, like I'm feeling down today. Depression is something that affects our everyday habits, the things that we do every day for a period of several weeks, and that's where it's depression, and it's impacting our work, our home life, things that we're doing at school. And that's the things that we're going to talk about today. That it's a serious, it can become a very serious illness, but it's very treatable.
And 1 in 5 people, I thought that was an astounding statistic. 1 in 5 people have this issue, and for older adults, it can be even more serious, or they may be more at risk. Why is that?
Well, what we know is that individuals with chronic illness have a higher risk of becoming depressed or anxious. And with chronic illness, the research shows, like if I have a chronic heart disease, or I have diabetes, or whatever it might be, my risk for depression goes up. But we know is with the older population, 80% have at least one chronic illness, and 50% have at least 2 chronic illnesses. So then that automatically makes that risk for depression higher in the older population. So then we see a higher rate of depression in the older population. But what I'm concerned about, and what we're concerned about in the United States, is that only out of the 1 in 5, only about a third of those with depression are getting the help that's needed, or getting the help that's out there. So there's a 2/3 of those with depression right now that are suffering, that don't need to be suffering, because there's help and there's hope and there's healing that's out there.
And sometimes this is one of those things that's hard to admit. You know, it's if you have something that is a physical ailment, it's more obvious. But this is one of those that I think sometimes people don't want to admit that they have something that is a problem here.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, there's still some stigma associated with mental illness. And what we're trying to work really hard in our community is to dispel that stigma and to get rid of the stigma. As I was saying earlier, mental illness is no different than any other illness. And that if I had, if I went to my doctor and my doctor says, Dr. Myers, you have diabetes, you need to get treatment, and this is what we need to do, I'm going to follow that treatment regimen and get treatment. If my doctor says, hey, you have depression, this is what you need to do, the same thing should happen. We should follow those treatment recommendations. We have these little stress balls that we give out at the hospital that are brains, and that's the whole purpose behind that. Is we're trying to give the message is that mental illness is a brain disorder, and that it's no different than any other illness, and that we want individuals to realize that there is treatment available for mental illness, and that we're here to help you with that.
You and I talked a little bit before we started the taping, and you mentioned it also earlier. This is treatable, right? This is almost all of the people that would come for treatment get better.
Absolutely. Depression is very, very treatable, and that's mental illness in general is treatable. But what we know is with depression is one of the most treatable mental illnesses. Over 80% of those who go for treatment see symptom relief relatively quickly after receiving treatment. And that's the good news. That Lincoln is blessed with a whole host of resources in our community, from treatment providers to support groups to the many different treatment options that we're going to talk about today that are available for folks.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about some of the symptoms, because there are a number of them, and I think sometimes I started looking at them and I go, oh, that's sort of scary, because I feel like I have some of those, but we're talking about more of the sustained kind of things, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's look at a couple of them here. So here are the first couple of those, and that's the feeling of hopelessness and pessimism, and then feelings of guilt, worthlessness, or helplessness. Those are tough ones.
Those are tough ones. Individuals who are feeling depressed have these feelings, or can have these feelings. So when we're looking at symptoms of depression, oftentimes individuals with depressions come to us and say that, hey, I'm feeling helpless, hopeless, about the future. And sometimes we may, like you were saying earlier, we might get up and we feel kind of helpless about the day. But it's when you're having these feelings ongoing. And when we're looking at diagnosing somebody with depression, we're asking for, okay, you're having these symptoms, but how long have you had these symptoms? And so we're looking at the longevity of the symptoms.
Is sometimes it helpful for other people to notice these things rather than someone to notice it themselves?
Absolutely. So oftentimes it's hard for us to see it in ourselves. So then when it's really important for us to ask the family members, friends, what their observations are, and you as the individual to get that observations from them as well, because sometimes you don't see it in yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the couple more. Irritability, restlessness, a loss of interest in familiar activities and hobbies. That seems like would be a good sign.
That's one that is often relatively seen by friends and family. Oftentimes you see that in yourself. You say, well, gosh, I really like to play basketball, and I can go out and shoot hoops and go to the gym and lift weights and those types of things. but I'm not going, and I'm kind of skipping that. So it might be, okay, I'm having a bad day, I'm not going today, not a big deal. But if I'm not going for a period of time and my friend notices that, gosh, Dave hasn't been coming around for a couple weeks, we need to check into that. We need to call our friend and say, what's going on? You haven't been around in a while.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. Okay, next one was fatigue.
The insomnia, the trouble sleeping. So either we're sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, or not feeling like we want to eat at all. Oftentimes with eating and sleeping, that oftentimes is a concern. And individuals with trouble eating and sleeping, that is a symptom that we need to be aware of as well.
Yeah, and again, we saw the one that was fatigue or lack
right.
of concentration sometimes. I mean, we can all relate to that in some fashion,
Yeah.
but again, we're talking about this sustained effort, right?
Right. Well, the concentration and the fatigue is the sustained. So if we're in school or if I'm at work and I just really can't make decisions, that can happen from day to day. But if it's just an ongoing thing and I'm just really having a hard time concentrating and I'm just feeling tired all the time, that's a symptom.
Yeah. Okay, next one I think is when we're getting into the thoughts of suicide, avoiding family. We talked a little bit about the insomnia, but the thoughts of suicide, that's
a serious symptom.
One, yeah.
So not everybody with depression is going to have thoughts of suicide, but if somebody is having thoughts of suicide as a symptom of depression, that's a serious symptom that we need to take action right away. So if you're a friend or a family member, or if you are the individual yourself, and you're at home and you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, I'm having thoughts of suicide and this might be impacting me, it's important that you take action and you call the 1-800-273-8255, the National Suicide Helpline, and talk to somebody. Call 911, get to the Brian West Mental Health Emergency Room, get to somebody that can help you, get connected to resources right away.
Yeah.
I mean, we can have a whole conversation or a whole show just on suicide prevention, but that is a symptom we need to take very, very seriously.
Let's talk about if someone thinks that they have or a number of these symptoms, or they see that in somebody else. I know that there is some ways that we can try to avoid depression, and there's also the screening process that you can go to, which is a very simple kind of a thing. Let's talk about those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, if folks are wanting to know, well, gosh, I might have some of these symptoms, I'm not quite sure, you can go to the Brian website and take a online screening. It's free, it's confidential. We have no way of knowing who's taking the screening. You go through and you're answering a bunch of questions that are kind of related to the symptoms that we put up on the screen. Those will, at the end of the screening, it'll tell you whether or not you've endorsed enough symptoms to warrant going forward for a full evaluation. So this screening is not a diagnosis, but it tells you whether or not to go for further evaluation. For depression, we have anxiety, alcohol, all kinds of different screenings on there. But there are also some things that you can do to kind of help prevent depression from happening, which are some things that we had up on the screen, which are exercising. It's important that you exercise. Exercising oftentimes produces some of the same effects as some of the medications that folks take for depression. Having a really good diet, eating a balanced meal, eating all of your meals, involving yourself in those activities and hobbies that you enjoy. And then the last one is connectedness. There's a lot of research out there that the more connected we are as an individual to our family, to our friends, and to our community, the less likely it is that we're going to become depressed, suicidal, abuse substances than folks who are less connected. And so that's what we can do as family members too with our friends and family, is to make sure that we're helping each other to become connected.
So we all need to get involved and make sure that people in those situations get out, maybe take them for a walk, do bring them dinner. All of those things can be helpful.
Absolutely.
I like the part about the family connection.
Yes.
We've just touched the surface here. We are out of time, unfortunately. Dr. Myers, thank you so much for being here. This is really important work, and we appreciate all that you do and everybody else does in this area in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us today on Live and Learn. I'm Jerry Renaud, and remember, it's never too late to live and learn.